Hey guys, tonight we journey back to the dusty, sun-drenched hills and white stone shores of ancient Greece. You're standing barefoot on warm marble, the salty breeze from the Aegean brushing against your skin, olive groves swaying lazily in the heat. Statues stare blankly from their pedestals, gods and mortals frozen in stone. Somewhere in the distance, a philosopher is arguing with a teenager in a toga, and no one's quite sure who's winning. This is the land of Socrates and Spartan warriors, of democracy and drama, of perfectly sculpted abs on statues anyway. You're surrounded by the familiar clang of bronze, the smell of sea salt and olive oil, and the unmistakable feeling that you're being watched by several judgmental gods. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. Not because of a battle or a plague, though those are both real possibilities, but simply because ancient Greek life is rough. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a dusty road as a rooster yells its opinion nearby. Welcome to Greece around the 5th century BCE, just in time for its golden age, though no one's calling it that yet. Athens is bustling, its buildings relatively new, its thinkers still thinking. Sparta is sharpening spears and not talking much. And everywhere in between, people are sweating. You'd think, with all the sculptures and columns and high-minded philosophy, that life here would be a dream. But for every Socrates annoying someone in the agora, there are 100 farmers with sore backs, a dozen soldiers with missing teeth, and more than a few citizens wondering when the next war will start. Spoiler alert, soon. It's always soon. Sure, ancient Greece gives us democracy. The idea, anyway. Only a small slice of the population actually gets to vote, basically adult male citizens who weren't slaves or foreigners. So yeah, democracy. Adjacent. But the concept, groundbreaking. And it's not just politics. Greeks are trailblazers in theater, architecture, astronomy, mathematics. They invent the Olympic Games, build temples without mortar, and debate ideas so intensely that someone eventually drinks hemlock over it. And we still quote them. Kind of impressive. And then there's the food. Olive oil is on everything, seriously, everything. You start to suspect they'd brush their teeth with it if they had toothbrushes, which they don't. We'll get to that. The cities are alive with chatter and trade. Ships come and go from the ports of Piraeus and Corinth, filled with pottery, grain, and occasionally pirates. Markets brim with fish bread and gossip. You pass old women bargaining over figs, slaves hauling amphorae, and children who've probably already memorized more poetry than you'll read in your lifetime. Still, beneath all the marble and mythology, daily life is hard. Most Greeks live in plain mud brick homes that bake in the summer and freeze in the winter. Streets are narrow and often fragrant. Sewers are more concept than reality. And yes, rats are a thing, but they endure because they believe. In gods who meddle constantly in oracles, who speak in riddles, and in the power of debate and drama. They seek arete, excellence, in all things, and that pursuit weaves through every part of life, from war to weaving. One fun tidbit you probably didn't know: ancient Greeks used crocodile dung as birth control. That's real. It didn't work, obviously, but points for creativity. Historians still argue whether that practice came from Egypt or developed independently, which raises the equally valid question: who tested it first? You step into the agora, the heart of public life in a city like Athens. It's not just a market, it's the original social network. People argue politics, trade, gossip, recite poetry, and sell fish all in the same breath. Philosophers hold impromptu lectures while teenagers roll their eyes. Citizens gather to vote on ostracizing someone. More on that later. And if someone's offering free figs, take two. They're probably sour, but it's polite. Further south, Sparta is different. No chit-chat, no drama festivals, no room for weakness. Boys are taken from their families at age 7 to start military training. And if you survive to adulthood, you're a full-time soldier until you're 60. Also, your cloak is red because blood stains don't show as much. The contrast between Athens and Sparta is massive. One nurtures thought, the other breeds warriors. Yet they both define what we think of as Greek. It's a messy, beautiful paradox. You sit now on a low wall under an olive tree, watching goats nibble at the weeds and feeling the weight of history settle on your shoulders. You're not royalty or a philosopher, you're just a person. And in this world, being a person means working hard, praying harder, and hoping the gods aren't in a mood today. So as we walk deeper into ancient Greece together, remember these were real people with real struggles. They worried about taxes, complained about their neighbors, and sometimes yelled at clouds, just like us. But they also dreamed of justice, debated truth, and tried against all odds to make sense of a confusing world. And now that you're here, you've got a lot to learn. Maybe start with how to survive the morning. It's not going to be easy. You wake up in the pale light of dawn, the air already carrying a dry warmth that promises a sweltering day ahead. You're curled up on a straw-filled mattress in the corner of a small, sun-baked mud brick house. The ceiling is low, the walls are uneven, and every creak and whisper outside echoes clearly in this tight little space. There's no insulation, just wattle and daubs smeared together with more hope than science. The family goat bleats from the other side of a thin partition, and someone nearby is grinding grain with a stone. Dust floats lazily in the sunbeam, slicing through a crack in the wooden shutter. You try to stretch, but someone else is already stepping over you. Personal space. Absolutely not a Greek concept. If you're lucky, your home has 2 rooms. More likely, it's just one shared space where everyone sleeps, eats, and exists in a symphony of body heat and snoring. The floor is packed earth swept daily, but never quite clean. No windows, just slits in the wall or a hole in the roof for smoke to escape and sunlight to pour through. In summer, it's a clay oven. In winter, it's a cold box with a fire that never quite warms. The mood of the day, entirely dictated by the weather. If it's hot, and it usually is, you start your morning already sweating your linen chiton clinging to you before breakfast. If it's winter, you shiver and hope the sun climbs fast. There are no thermostats, no insulation, no warm showers to coax you into alertness. Just the elements and whatever grit you've got. You stumble outside into a cramped alley. Chickens dart around your feet, and someone has definitely dumped something unpleasant nearby. A neighbor waves, already carrying a basket on her head, and you nod in that half-awake, still dreaming way. The dirt road is uneven, and every step stirs up the same dust. You'll spend the rest of the day trying to brush off your clothes. Hope you like beige. Your neighbors are already awake. In ancient Greece, dawn isn't optional, it's mandatory. The sun tells you when to rise, when to work, when to rest. Time here is natural, not mechanical. No ticking clocks, just shadows on a sundial. And the slow burn of the sky turning gold. Men head out to tend olive groves, vineyards, or fishing boats. Women begin their long day of grinding grain, hauling water, and managing the chaos inside their little homes. Children. They're either helping or being shooed away, depending on the mood. You glance up and catch a sliver of the Acropolis in the distance, just enough to remind you that you're part of something grand, even if your feet are stuck in the mud. That marble crown atop the city gleams in the rising light, a beacon of civilization. But down here, life is all cracked clay sweat and the occasional rat. And then there's the noise. Dogs barking, pots clanging, merchants already shouting about fresh figs. If you're in Athens, the din builds quickly as the agora wakes up and the city churns into motion. If you're in a rural village, the soundtrack is more livestock, less philosophy, but just as loud. Remember, there's no running water, which means before you can even think about eating or washing someone, possibly you is heading to the nearest well or fountain with a clay amphora. If you're unlucky, the fountain queue has already formed. And yes, it's mostly women waiting in line, gossiping, or eyeing each other's tunics, while the water dribbles slowly. The walk back with a full amphora is a feat of balance, strength, and hope. Drop it. And that's your morning ruined along with your toes. Amphorae are not lightweight plastic jugs. They're awkward, heavy, and deeply committed to break-in if you so much as glance at them wrong. By now the sun is properly up. Its heat soaks into the stones of the path, the plaster of the walls, and your skin. You squint toward the light, already planning which shady corners you'll escape to later. Because shade is sacred. You'll cross the agora twice just to walk in someone else's shadow. Quirky fact of the day, in some parts of Greece, people painted their homes white, not for aesthetics, but to reflect the heat. Historians still argue whether that practice was widespread in this era or developed later under Roman influence. But either way, the idea of battling the sun with lime wash shows just how desperate folks were to stay cool. You re-enter your home with the water brushing past someone brushing past you. There's no privacy, no doors inside, just fabric drapes and unspoken boundaries. It's cozy in the least luxurious sense of the word. And it smells, let's call it earthy. A blend of sweat, oil, dust, and whatever was cooking last night. You sit down on a low stool and try to mentally prepare for the day ahead. Your back aches already. Your sandals, if you have any, are worn. Your tunic sticks to your side. And yet, there's a rhythm here, a strange peace in the familiarity of it all. Because no matter how harsh it is, this is life, your life. And in ancient Greece, every day is a small triumph just to get going. You're barely out of bed, And already the challenges stack up like amphorae in a storeroom. The idea of a morning routine in ancient Greece. Let's say it's less spa day and more ancient obstacle course. First priority attempting some kind of hygiene. You head to the corner of your home where a small ceramic basin sits your best friend and worst enemy. There's no running water, of course, and what's in that basin is probably lukewarm by now and suspiciously murky. Splashing your face feels more symbolic than cleansing. There is no soap, that miraculous bubbly substance not invented yet in a way you'd recognize. Instead, you reach for the olive oil flask. Yes, oil. Because in this world, cleaning means coating your skin with a layer of fine pressed olive oil, letting it sit, and then scraping it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. It sounds luxurious. It's not. The oil pulls off dust, sweat, and grime more or less, but it also leaves behind a lingering smell and a thin sheen that makes you glisten like a rotisserie chicken. It works, sort of. Athletes, warriors, and even philosophers use the strigil method daily. It's efficient in a no-water society. It's also cold. The metal bites against your skin, especially in winter. And the noise it makes, like someone trying to peel a peach with a spoon. Bathing is communal. Public baths aren't fancy Roman style yet, but gymnasiums and palaestras offer shared spaces for cleaning and exercising if you're male and have time. Women and slaves, not so much. They bathe at home, if at all, and often last in the queue for that precious oil. As you scrape and scrub your house bustles, family members shuffle around the cramped space, navigating invisible lanes like pros. Someone's stoking a fire in the hearth, more smoke than flame. Someone else is stepping over a dog. If you want privacy, good luck. The closest thing you'll get is a cloth curtain and a very patient attitude. Oh, and don't even think about brushing your teeth. Toothbrushes won't exist for centuries. Instead, you might chew on a frayed stick rinse with wine or rub ashes and crushed herbs on your gums. Breath mints, you wish. Honestly, everyone's breath smells like fermented goat and garlic, so you blend in. You dress quickly. Your chiton is a single rectangular piece of cloth, fastened with pins and a belt. No buttons, no zippers, no labels. It's functional, but fussy, prone to slipping, if not pinned just right. For someone of your modest status, the fabric is coarse linen, comfortable in summer, less so in the chill. Richer folks might have dyed wool or embroidery, but your look is solid budget toga. A quirky fact, the Greeks didn't really use underwear. Nope. It's just you, a tunic, and the open air, which makes communal living even more intimate. Historians still argue whether loincloths were worn more commonly than we think. But let's be real, if they weren't enough to make a difference. You head outside to check the street. Your front door is more a flap of fabric or a wood plank than anything secure. The sun's higher now. Dust kicks up with every footstep and smells are thickening. That's because waste disposal here is a community affair. Chamber pots get dumped in alleys. If it rained last night, the result is somewhere between earthy and apocalyptic. The communal toilet system rare, and mostly in urban centers. In smaller towns or homes, it's pits or pots, and sometimes you just go in the fields. You wipe with whatever's handy, leaves shards of broken pottery. Yes, really. or scraps of cloth if you're fancy. That shard method called a pessoi, effective if a bit sharp. Still you manage. You have to. Because these struggles are the price of existence in a civilization that values order, beauty, and the mind, but hasn't quite figured out plumbing. You nod to a neighbor who's struggling to carry a bundle of firewood. She's got a toddler on her hip and a resigned look that says, "Just another Tuesday." People in this world live close spatially and emotionally. Everyone knows each other's business. Privacy isn't just rare, it's considered a bit suspicious. Why be alone when you could be debating ethics with a stranger? It's loud. Kids are yelling. Merchants are shouting about saltfish and wine. A dog barks at a cart. A pot crashes somewhere, followed by curses. You move through it, all part of the morning flood of humanity. The agora is already teeming with people who've accepted chaos as a lifestyle. As you walk, you pass a shrine tucked into the wall, dedicated to Hestia or Hermes, depending on the household. You pause and mutter a quick prayer just in case. The gods hear everything after all, and a bad morning could always get worse. One last oddity. You realize your sense of morning here is more flexible than back home. There are no exact hours, no alarms. Time is measured by the sun's position and social rhythm. You don't ask, "What time is it?" You ask, "Is the sun up high enough to go to the market?" And you think somehow, despite the oil baths, the crowded homes, the shards as toilet paper, you're adjusting. Because this is just what it means to start a day in ancient Greece. Grit, grime, and a whole lot of olive oil. You finally settle on a flat stone bench outside your home, legs stiff from yesterday's work or training or both. The morning sun now burns without mercy, which is great for drying amphorae, not so much for human skin. You're hungry, of course. And what awaits you? A breakfast that wouldn't even pass as a snack on a budget airline. In most parts of Greece, particularly among the working class, breakfast is frugal. You nibble on a hunk of barley bread that's been sitting out since yesterday or maybe longer. It's dry, hard, and about as welcoming as a Spartan dinner guest. You dip it into a bit of diluted wine, yes, even in the morning, not for fun, but because water might make you sick. Wine is safer. Barely. If you're lucky, someone's got olives to share. They're sharp and oily and occasionally bitter enough to make your eyes water. You savor every bite because even olives aren't guaranteed. Honey, only for the wealthy. Fruit, seasonal and rationed. Cheese, maybe a tiny bit goat milk. Based if you're near a pasture. Meat, dream on. That's for festivals or sacrifices or both. Now, if you're in Sparta, things are even grimmer. Spartan boys begin the day with something called black broth. It's made from pig's blood vinegar and a dash of boiled despair. Legend has it one visiting foreigner spat it out instantly and declared death preferable. But Spartans, they love it. They drink it with grim satisfaction, like it's proof of their superiority. And maybe it is. Because if you can stomach that every morning, war seems like a spa retreat. Spartan meals are all about equality and endurance. Communal messes mean you eat the same as your peers, no showing off with fancy cheese or foreign figs. You sit with your military unit and pass around bowls of soup that look more like battlefield mud than nutrition. The goal isn't to enjoy food, it's to endure it, to need less, to complain never, and to keep your mind sharp and your body lean. Excess is weakness. In contrast, Athenian breakfasts are humble, but a bit more varied, especially if you're in a household with some wealth. Barley porridge, perhaps, sweetened with dried figs if you're lucky. A smear of soft cheese. A handful of nuts. But for the average citizen, it's still stale bread and watered down wine. Occasionally, someone might trade a little oil or honey for something more exciting, but that's a rare treat. And here's a quirky detail. While most Greeks sat or reclined at later meals, breakfast was eaten quickly, usually standing or perched on a low stool. It wasn't social. It was fuel. In fact, the word for breakfast akratisma comes from akratos, meaning unmixed wine. Although paradoxically, the wine is always watered down. Historians still argue whether this term hints at an older custom or simply reflects the daily drink. No matter where you are, food is more about survival than enjoyment. This is a world without supermarkets, refrigerators, or even ovens in most homes. Everything is made from scratch, usually by the women of the household or slaves. That stale bread you're chewing, someone ground the grain by hand yesterday, kneaded the dough and baked it in a communal oven down the road. You try not to think about the soot lining the inside. And hunger isn't always about the now, it's a shadow that looms over every Greek city. Droughts failed, harvests blocked trade routes. Any of these can bring real famine. That's why people store grain in big ceramic jars, guard olive oil like treasure, and treat figs like they're made of gold. If you're among the elite, you get a slightly better start to your day. You might have dates or imported delicacies. Maybe a servant fan wafts the morning flies away as you sip goat milk. But even then, breakfast remains modest compared to the evening meal. Greeks believed in eating light early in the day, saving the real feast, if any, for dinner. By now, your stomach's only half satisfied, and your mouth still tastes like fermented resin and barley dust. You stand, brush off the crumbs, and eye the sun's position. Work calls, maybe the fields, maybe the agora, maybe military training. No one's lounging around on account of a weak breakfast. But food is never far from anyone's thoughts. In a culture so shaped by scarcity, every morsel is political. Grain shortages can topple governments. Olive oil can launch trade wars. And fish is power. Access to good fish markets becomes a matter of civic pride and strategic importance. Athenians in particular are obsessed. Some people attend assemblies just to argue about mackerel prices. Still, there's a comfort in this routine. Bread, olives, wine, it's predictable, stable, and it binds everyone from slaves to citizens to philosophers in the same culinary ritual. Even Socrates probably grumbled about the bread being too hard. You pass a group of young boys wrestling in the dust, their eyes already set on their mid-morning snack. A fig, maybe, if they behave. A woman carries a basket of greens, her face tight with concentration. Somewhere a fisherman unloads his morning catch and quietly calculates how much he can ask before people start yelling. And you square your shoulders, Wipe your oily hands on your tunic and prepare to meet the day. Your belly is only half full, but your resolve is steady. In ancient Greece, breakfast might be meager, but the day ahead never is. You rub your hands together, hoping to rid them of the olive oil sheen left over from breakfast. Spoiler alert, you won't. Because in ancient Greece, the concept of cleanliness is more about ritual than sterilization. Soap as we know it doesn't exist yet. The Romans will later claim to invent it, but for now, you're working with the humble power combo of oil and scraping. The strigil comes out again, a curved bronze tool with a sharp edge designed to drag oil, dirt, sweat, and dignity off your skin in one go. You probably used it earlier, but now that the sun's climbing and the air is thickening, you give your arms another pass. Public life requires a certain presentation. It's not about being clean in a modern sense. It's about being not too offensively grimy. There are communal spaces for this purpose. In cities like Athens, the gymnasium is a hotspot, part training ground, part hygiene hub, part intellectual hangout. You strip, oil up, work out, then scrape down. It's a strange mix of fitness, grooming, and philosophical debate. 1 minute you're wrestling a friend, the next you're arguing whether virtue is teachable, all while shining like a sun-baked rotisserie chicken. But let's talk about laundry, or rather the near total lack of it. Clothes are valuable, and washing them is labor-intensive. Water must be carried pots, heated fabric, beaten with wooden paddles or trampled underfoot, and the detergent of choice, urine. Yes, really. Aged urine contains ammonia, which acts as a natural cleanser. So when someone says your tunic smells sharp, they might mean it literally. You wear your chiton until it's visibly offensive or falls apart. Then you patch it, repurpose it, or pass it down. For most people, clothes are too precious to treat casually, which is why even in the sticky Mediterranean heat, you rarely see people changing outfits. That white linen you're sweating through, it's doing a tour of duty. And now for the part your teeth have been dreading: dental hygiene. There's no toothpaste, no floss, no toothbrush. Maybe you chew on a twig or rinse with vinegar. Wealthier folks might have access to ground pumice or crushed bones as a kind of tooth polish, but it's not exactly minty fresh. The result? A lot of bad breath, missing molars, and a general look of dental despair by middle age. Historians still argue whether the Greeks understood cavities or simply saw toothaches as divine punishment. What we do know is that dental work was rare, painful, and mostly involved yanking out whatever hurt. There are no records of fillings, and no one's invented the toothbrush yet. So unless you're chewing on a mint leaf, you're living in a cloud of fermented barley and goat cheese. Bathing when it happens is usually communal. If you live near a river, you might take a dip. But more often, especially in urban areas, people head to designated bathhouses or public fountains. Women bathe at home or in more secluded areas. Slaves are expected to maintain hygiene quietly, efficiently, and without disrupting the household hierarchy. Cleanliness is classed like everything else, a quirky tidbit. Greeks believed in cleaning the inside of the body, too. That's right, enemas. Clay tubes and herbal infusions were part of the ancient medical toolkit. You probably won't experience this firsthand, unless you're sick or a patient of Hippocratic medicine, but still, the thought lingers. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished bronze mirror, wavy, distorted, but recognizably you. Your hair's tied back if you're working, or styled with oil if you're socializing. Makeup is mostly reserved for women, involving lead-based powders and charcoal-based liners. Dangerous, absolutely. But aesthetics beat safety when Aphrodite's watching. Odors are managed with perfumes if you can afford them. They're oil-based, made from herbs like myrrh, rosemary, and saffron. Smelling pleasant is a sign of status. Smelling neutral is the goal. Smelling bad, that's for slaves, laborers, and the sick. So you dab your neck with a bit of rose oil and hope it masks the scent of everything else. Even bodily waste is an exercise in adaptation. Toilets are pits or ceramic chamber pots. Public latrines exist, but only in larger cities and often only for men. You squat wipe with pesoi, those delightful ceramic shards again, or smooth stones, and go about your business. Privacy is minimal. Cleanliness is a flexible concept. One fascinating outlier. The Greeks were obsessed with ears. Philosophers wrote about the symbolic importance of listening well, and physical ear cleaning was a whole thing. Long metal tools, like ancient Q-tips of doom, were used to maintain ear hygiene. Seems like a small detail, but when you think of how much time they spent listening to speeches and debates, it makes a weird kind of sense. After all this scraping, rinsing, oiling, and praying that no one notices the wine stain on your tunic, you're finally ready for the day. You're not clean exactly, but you're as close as anyone else is. You smell like olive oil and dust. Your feet are caked with street grime. Your teeth feel like they've hosted a symposium of fungi, and yet in this world you pass muster. You are by Greek standards presentable. You walk out into the sun, feeling the oil glisten on your arms, ready to face the agora, the gymnasium, or maybe just a surprisingly intense philosophical argument with your neighbor. The cleanliness bar may be low, but you've cleared it. You reach for your chiton, a light rectangular piece of linen fabric that you wrap around your body and pin at the shoulders. There's no tailoring, no buttons, and definitely no elastic waistband. Just folds, pins, and hope. It slips a little as you tie the belt at your waist. But that's part of the charm. Everyone's adjusting their clothes all the time, especially in the heat. It's both fashion and a full-time job. On hot days, and they're mostly hot, you go sleeveless. That's practical. On colder mornings, you might throw a himation over your chiton, a heavier rectangle of wool. You drape over one shoulder and wrap around your body like a burrito with commitment issues. There's no right or wrong way to wear it, which is freeing, until a breeze hits and your left side is suddenly greeting the neighborhood. Shoes optional. Most people go barefoot, especially indoors or in the countryside. Sandals, when worn, are simple leather affairs tied with thongs around the ankles. They're not exactly arch supportive. If you're rich, you might have fancier versions with colored straps or dyed soles. But for most people, calloused feet are the norm, and stepping on something sharp is a daily gamble. Now here's a fun fashion quirk. Greeks didn't care much about color coordination, but they loved symbolic meaning. Purple, for instance, was associated with wealth and nobility, though it was ridiculously expensive to produce, thanks sea snails. Patterns were usually simple, often geometric. and woven directly into the cloth. Embroidery. Sure, if you've got time and status, but the majority are rocking plain, functional looks. And get this, children often go completely naked during hot months. It's normal, unremarkable, and frankly, a smart move in the climate. Historians still argue whether this was out of practicality or philosophical alignment with natural living, but either way, diaper budgets are minimal. As for hairmen, typically keep it short and simple. Beards are in thick, curled, and frequently styled. A well-groomed beard is a mark of maturity and intellect. Shaving isn't popular yet, though it starts gaining traction after Alexander the Great sets a trend. Women usually wear their hair long tied back in braids or buns, sometimes adorned with ribbons or decorative pins if they can afford them. It's about modesty and status, not freedom of expression. Cosmetics, if you're a woman of means, include white lead powder for the skin, crushed berries for lip color, and kohl for eyeliner. The result? A dramatic porcelain-faced look that says, "I'm rich enough not to work in the sun." Of course, the health risks of lead aren't known yet, but the look impeccable. You glow quite literally. And possibly from mild poisoning. There's a sort of paradox in how Greeks dress simplicity and function, complexity and symbolism. You might look identical to your neighbor, but the fabric quality, the draping technique, the accessories, or lack thereof, all speak volumes. A single gold pin could announce your household's wealth. A laurel wreath might signal recent victory in an athletic contest. A deliberately worn cloak over the left shoulder that could mark you as a philosopher, ready to drop opinions like olive pits. And then for the warriors, there's armor. If you're of military age and male, you've got a hoplite kit stashed somewhere. It's not standard issue. You buy your own. Helmet, breastplate, greaves, shield, all made of bronze or hardened leather, passed down through generations or pieced together from trade. Putting it on is an ordeal. It's heavy, sweaty, and chafes in all the worst places. But it also transforms you into something closer to a god, or at least someone the Persians should worry about. Spartan warriors take things to another level. Their iconic red cloaks are more than a fashion statement. They're part psychological warfare, hiding bloodstains and sending a message: we don't flinch. Beneath that cloak, simple tunics, minimal armor, and a scowl that could dent bronze. Spartan clothing is meant to train endurance, not provide comfort. Even their shoes, when worn, are more suggestion than protection. You watch a group of young men jog past towards the gymnasium chitons, hitched up for movement. They're dusty, loud, and somehow elegant in their constant rearranging of cloth. A girl near the well adjusts her hymation with one hand while balancing a full amphora on her head. You try not to stare, it's rude, but honestly, it's impressive. One odd fringe tidbit: some Greeks believed that wearing amulets under your tunic could protect you from everything from disease to envy. These might be carved stones, bits of bone, or even miniature figurines of gods. Tucked close to the skin, never shown. Fashion meets superstition in the most intimate way. So, with your chiton wrinkling already and your sandals slapping unevenly against the dirt, you head out into the midday heat. The sun reflects off whitewashed walls and the fabric clings again. You shift your belt. You tug your hymation. Someone bumps into you and your pin slips loose. You sigh, readjust, and keep going. Because in this world, clothes are armor against heat judgment and the gods themselves. And the way you wear them, that's half your reputation. You're not just a citizen in ancient Greece. You're a soldier in waiting. Because in this world, manhood isn't measured by wealth or wit alone. It's measured by your ability to hold a spear march in formation and shout threatening things at Persians, or Spartans, or Athenians. Honestly, war rotates like the seasons around here. In Athens, your military life begins young. Boys start basic education around age 7, learning letters, music, and physical training. By the time you hit 18, you're drafted into the ephebic training system, a mix of gym workouts, weapon drills, and what we'll call life coaching by yelling. It's a civic rite of passage more expected than celebrated. You're not special. You're a cog in the defense machine. You learn to fight with a spear doru, carry a round bronze shield aspice, and wear a heavy helmet that muffles sound and smells like your uncle's armpit. If you're rich, you buy your own full hoplite armor, cuirass greaves, and the aforementioned shield with your family's chosen insignia. If you're poor, you make do with lighter gear and extra bravery. No subsidies here. Defense is your duty and your expense. The formation of choice, the phalanx. You and dozens of fellow citizens stand shoulder to shoulder shields, overlapping spears angled outward. It's teamwork, terror, and sheer muscle memory. You don't fight as a lone hero. You fight as a wall of bronze and discipline. If one man breaks formation, everyone risks death. And because this is Greece, there's a speech about honor for every spear thrust. Over in Sparta, things start even earlier. Boys leave home at age 7, enter the agoge, and never really stop training. Education is physical punishment with occasional literacy. You learn to endure hunger, pain, and humiliation without complaint. You're encouraged to steal food not for survival, but to practice stealth. If you get caught, you're punished for being bad at it. Welcome to Spartan logic. By your teenage years in Sparta, you're living in barracks, drilling daily, and learning to suppress emotion. You eat in communal mess halls, sleep on reed mats, and dream of your first battle. Personal expression is frowned upon. Complaining is a crime against the state, and your cloak, you get one a year. Wash it. That's soft nonsense. You wear it until it walks away on its own. Still, there's pride here. Spartan warriors are feared across the Greek world. Their discipline is unmatched, their loyalty legendary. When King Leonidas and his 300 face-down Xerxes at Thermopylae, it's not just bravery. It's the endpoint of lifelong training. To die well is better than to live poorly. And in Sparta, poor means anything less than perfect form. Back in Athens, things are a bit more democratic. Soldiers vote, argue, even take their complaints to court. Military service is part of your civic identity, but so is debate. You might fight in the morning and argue policy in the evening. That duality, the citizen-soldier, defines Athenian masculinity. Of course, wars aren't just external. City-states fight each other constantly. The Peloponnesian War, a decades-long drama-filled sibling feud between Athens and Sparta. You might be marching out to fight men who speak your language, worship your gods, and wear the same sandals. And tomorrow you might march back and vote on whether to offer them peace, it's complicated. Here's a fringe tidbit: some hoplites carved symbols or even short poems into their shields. It wasn't official policy, just personal flair. Think of it like ancient battlefield graffiti. Historians still argue whether these messages were meant for enemies' gods, or just a bored poet with a death wish. Then there's the Navy. If you're in Athens and not cut out for land combat, you might find yourself on a trireme, a sleek, fast, and utterly exhausting warship powered by 170 rowers. Each oar is manned by a free citizen, not slaves, and you row in perfect unison to the beat of a drum. It's teamwork, terror, and back pain all in one splintery package. Naval combat is chaos. Ships ram each other at full speed, trying to break hulls or capsize decks. If boarding occurs, it becomes hand to hand. You can't swim, most Greeks can't, so falling overboard often means drowning in armor. Yet the Navy is Athens' pride. At Salamis, Athenian sailors outmaneuver the mighty Persian fleet, turning the tide of war with strategy and raw courage. And remember, war isn't seasonal here. Battles can erupt with little warning, and you must be ready. Your kit stays packed. Your spear leans near the door. Your shield always within reach. Even festivals have military undertones. You might parade in armor before a feast, reminding everyone that this fun, it's defended by sweat and steel. Not everyone fights, of course. Slaves are barred from service, and medics, resident foreigners, rarely join unless desperate. Women are entirely excluded except in Sparta, where they train for fitness but never join the front lines. Their role is to raise warriors and shame husbands who return without their shield. So as you polish your helmet and adjust your greaves, remember, military service isn't a phase. It's your identity. Whether you're a lean Spartan teen, a philosophical Athenian sailor, or a hoplite with sore shoulders and one too many close calls, this life is your duty. And duty in ancient Greece is everything. You glance across the courtyard and see her quiet, veiled eyes lowered as she carries a jug of water from the family well to the kitchen. She's your sister, your wife, your neighbor's daughter. And in ancient Greece, she exists mostly in the shadows. If you're a woman here, your world is small and carefully managed. From birth, expectations are wrapped around you tighter than a chiton. You grow up inside learning to spin wool, weave cloth, manage the home, and keep your voice soft. Outside belongs to the men, the agora, the gymnasium, the assembly. Your realm is domestic, respectful, invisible, or at least that's the ideal. In Athens, especially, female lives are tightly scripted. A respectable woman rarely leaves the house except for festivals or funerals. When she does, she's veiled and accompanied. Her name isn't even supposed to be mentioned in public. It's seen as immodest. You learn early to be quiet, chaste, and obedient. Not exactly the girl boss energy of today. Marriage comes early, mid-teens, if not sooner, and is arranged by your father. Love doesn't factor into it. Property, alliances, and reputation do. Your husband will likely be much older, possibly someone you barely know. Your role is to produce legitimate male heirs, manage household slaves, and maintain the family's honor. If your husband dies, you're passed back to your father or handed to a male relative. Freedom. Not really an option. Yet within the home, women wield serious responsibility. You're in charge of all domestic affairs, weaving food storage, supervising slaves, and raising children. A good household manager is respected even if she never hears it directly. And weaving isn't just busy work, it's economic survival. Your loom produces clothing for your family, items for sale or barter, and sacred offerings for the gods. Penelope's endless weaving in the Odyssey isn't just symbolism, it's survival. Now that's Athens. But move down the Peloponnesian Peninsula, and you hit a massive exception, Sparta. Spartan women live by a different code. They're not veiled. They're not silent. They don't stay indoors. In fact, they run the place when the men are at war, which is almost always. From a young age, Spartan girls train in athletics, running, wrestling, javelin. Why? Because strong women produce strong babies. They eat well, move freely, and speak their minds. A popular Spartan saying goes, "Come back with your shield or on it." That's not a husband talking to a wife. That's a Spartan mother talking to her son. Spartan women also inherit and own land, something almost unheard of in other Greek city-states. They control wealth, influence politics through sharp commentary, and are respected for their physical presence. They're still expected to marry and bear children, but there's a dignity in their autonomy. Other Greeks find them scandalous, too bold, too powerful, which honestly is kind of the point. Back in Athens, women do participate in religion. Priestesses serve goddesses like Athena and Demeter. They oversee festivals like the Thesmophoria, a women-only ritual involving fertility, agriculture, and possibly the rotting of pig remains underground. It's weird, sacred, and fiercely guarded. Men are not welcome, and honestly, they're terrified of it. Another quirk, wet nurses. Wealthy Athenian families often hire slave women to breastfeed their babies. This creates a complicated, dynamic, deep bonds form between child and nurse, even though she remains a possession. Historians still argue whether this practice influenced class mobility or reinforced strict hierarchies. But the emotional weight of such relationships lingers in surviving texts. And speaking of class, let's not forget the slave women. Their experience is harsher still. They do everything: fetch water, clean, cook, care for children, even weave under supervision. They can be physically punished, separated from their families, and sold at a whim. Their voices are absent in history, but their hands built much of daily Greek life. Even free lower-class women aren't spared the restrictions. They may have to work selling goods, farming, or assisting craftsmen, but they're still judged by elite standards of behavior. If they're too loud, too visible, or too successful, society squints and whispers. And then there are the hetairai, courtesans, not prostitutes in the modern sense, but educated companions for elite men. They're trained in music, conversation, and often philosophy. They attend symposia, drink in parties where wives are forbidden. They debate, flirt, and sometimes wield real influence. Aspasia, for instance, was Pericles' partner and advisor, hosting gatherings of Athens' brightest minds. She's proof that in rare rule-bending cases, women could shine outside the domestic sphere. Still, these women walk a narrow line. Respectable wives and daughters can't be seen associating with them. Yet powerful men praise them in poems and speeches. A paradox, absolutely. But then ancient Greek society is full of those. So you glance back at the woman by the well. Her eyes meet yours for a second, steady, knowing, unafraid. She might never speak in the assembly, but she's part of what holds this world together. She weaves the fabric of society literally and metaphorically. And if the gods are watching, they'd better show her some respect. Because in a culture where female power is hidden, denied, or reshaped into myth, the women of Greece still endure, still influence, still whisper truths that echo louder than any public speech. You step into the sun-drenched heart of Athens, the agora, dodging a fruit vendor, and nearly tripping over a stray dog that may or may not be named after a god. Ahead, a crowd is already gathering, murmuring, pointing, jostling for space. This isn't a market day. It's an assembly day. Time to practice that great Greek invention everyone loves to brag about: democracy. But before you get too excited, let's make one thing clear. This democracy is strictly invitation only. Out of Athens' population of maybe 300,000 hahorn, only about 30,000 are eligible to participate. That's right, only adult male citizens born to Athenian parents. Women no vote. Slaves no chance. Foreigners, even those who've lived here their whole lives, nada. Still, for those privileged few, it's a civic playground. You head up to the Nix, a rocky hill where citizens gather to shout opinions into the air and vote on everything from military campaigns to trash disposal. There are no elected representatives, not really. You speak for yourself. And if you don't show up well, the state has a clever solution. Public slaves with ropes dipped in red dye will herd reluctant voters toward the assembly. Show up late, and your tunic bears the shameful streak of civic neglect. The system is called ecclesia, and it meets about 40 times a year. Speeches are given. Votes are taken usually by show of hands, though sometimes with pebbles or shards. Decisions are binding even if they're deeply questionable. Want to launch a war? Sure. Raise taxes. Let's argue about it first. Condemn a man to death because you didn't like his vibes. That's a Tuesday. Then there's the Boule, a council of 500 citizens chosen by lottery each year. Yes, lottery. Because Athenians believe random selection prevents corruption and elitism. It's your civic duty to serve if your name is pulled. You might spend the year managing finances, supervising public works, or coordinating festivals. Or you might just learn how to nap through very long debates. This commitment to direct involvement is powerful and exhausting. Democracy here isn't a side hobby. It's a lifestyle. It requires constant participation, constant awareness. You don't just vote and go home. You debate, inspect, question, and then you eat lunch and do it again. But not all participation is equal. Wealthy citizens still pull strings behind the scenes. They fund public projects to gain favor, host banquets to sway opinions, and speak more persuasively thanks to expensive educations. Rhetoric is a weapon in this world. And the best speakers can change laws with their voices. If you're a poor farmer with bad teeth and a lisp, good luck. Now let's talk about one of democracy's strangest and most theatrical practices, ostracism. Once a year, Athenians gather and vote on whether someone should be exiled from the city for 10 years, not because of a crime, just because they might become too powerful, too popular, or too annoying. If the vote passes, citizens scratch a name onto a shard of pottery ostrakhan and drop it into a bin. Get the most votes, pack your bags. Imagine that. You're a prominent general beloved by the people, maybe even a war hero. And then bam, 10 years of exile because you smiled a little too smugly at the last assembly. It's democracy's version of the unfollow button, but with higher stakes and worse handwriting. Some famous figures fall to ostracism. Themistocles, who helped defeat the Persians, is later kicked out for getting a bit too high on his own glory. Historians still argue whether ostracism genuinely protected Athens from tyranny or just served as a popularity contest with a grudge. Despite its flaws, the Athenian system is radically advanced for its time. Citizens serve as jurors in massive trials, sometimes hundreds in one courtroom. There are no lawyers. You speak for yourself, crafting emotional appeals and dramatic gestures. The audience, your peers. And verdicts are final, even fatal. Women, meanwhile, watch from the sidelines if they're allowed to watch at all. Foreigners can't own property or marry citizens. Slaves build the roads, row the ships, and serve the food, all while being considered property themselves. This is democracy, yes, but democracy for the few. And yet, something profound is happening here. For the first time in history, people rule themselves in a structured legal system based on debate and majority rule. It's clunky, it's exclusive, it's messy, but it sparks a flame that generations later, others will fan into revolutions. A quirky fact: public officials in Athens had their integrity monitored by random citizens. The dokimasia process allowed anyone to challenge an official's competence. If they failed, they were removed from office before they even started. Ancient HR, but with more yelling. You step away from the crowd, now your ears buzzing from speeches, and the scent of sweat olives and ambition lingering in the air. The city is alive with opinions. Democracy here is not polite. It's a full contact sport. And as you pass a child reciting lines from Homer and a group of elders arguing over fish taxes, you realize everyone has something to say, even if only a few get to say it out loud. You pass through a narrow alleyway where two men are arguing over the price of a donkey. At their feet, unnoticed, a boy quietly stacks amphorae. He doesn't look up. He doesn't speak. He's a slave, and his silence is expected. In ancient Greece, slavery isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. It underpins everything from the economy to the family home. You can't walk a block in Athens or Sparta without encountering a slave hauling water, tending sheep, or silently sweeping the dust from someone else's threshold. It's so normalized, so ingrained, that most citizens don't even think of it as wrong, just necessary. There are an estimated 80,000 to 100,000 slaves in Athens alone during its golden age. That's nearly half the population. Some are born into slavery. Others are prisoners of war or victims of piracy. Still others are sold into bondage by desperate families. It's a catch-all category for those without freedom, and it's terrifyingly broad. Your own household might own a few. A cook, a cleaner, a nursemaid. They live in cramped quarters, often just a corner of the kitchen or a spot near the animals. Their names are simple sometimes, just nouns, pot sharp little. They rise before you sleep after you and speak only when spoken to. They are your property in the legal sense. You could sell them, trade them, punish them without trial. And yet the roles they fill vary wildly. Some slaves are unskilled laborers breaking rocks in silver mines under torturous conditions. The mines at Lorient are infamous hot, dark, airless tunnels where slaves toil chained, inhaling metal dust and praying for a shift change that never comes. Life expectancy. Don't ask. Others are domestic workers, often female, and often subject to, well, whatever their master wants. There's no legal protection, no safe space, just the hierarchy of power, brutal and absolute. Then there are the educated slaves. If you're lucky enough to be born literate in another culture, say Thrace or Lydia, you might become a tutor secretary or estate manager. You could end up with a certain status within the household even trusted, but freedom still not yours. And in a strange twist, some slaves become more powerful than free citizens. In Athens, public slaves owned by the city, rather than individuals, serve as clerks, administrators, even policemen. The Scythian archers, for example, are public slaves who enforce crowd control during assemblies. You might see one with a bow and braided hair gently prodding a reluctant citizen toward the Knicks with a nudge and a blank stare. Historians still argue whether the sheer scale of Athenian slavery contradicts their ideals of democracy. After all, the same men voting on justice and equality are also buying and selling humans like grain. It's a cognitive dissonance the Greeks never fully resolve and rarely even question. In Sparta, the slave system is even more extreme. The Helots, native Messenians enslaved after conquest, outnumber Spartan citizens several times over. They farm the land, feed the army, and live under constant surveillance. Every year, Spartan magistrates declare ritual war on the Helots, legally permitting their murder without consequence. It's psychological control through institutionalized terror. And yet, Helots are cunning. They rebel, periodically sabotage crops, and whisper discontent across fields. Spartan boys are trained to spy on them, even assassinate promising leaders before they gain traction. It's brutal, relentless, and essential to Spartan survival. Without Helots, Sparta starves. In cities like Corinth or Thebes, slavery takes more mercantile forms. Slaves work in workshops, produce pottery, mine salt, raise livestock. Some are allowed to live semi-independently, earning wages they might eventually use to buy their freedom. But emancipation is rare. And even when it happens, you remain a freedman, not a citizen. You're stuck in a liminal space, grateful, but never equal. A quirky historical tidbit. Some Greeks believed you could tell a slave by how they walked. Citizens were supposed to move confidently, slowly, with dignity. Slaves, constantly rushing to serve, developed a hunched, hurried gait. It became a social cue, a visual shorthand. Step too quickly and someone might mistake you for property. Philosophers occasionally weighed in. Plato and Aristotle both accepted slavery as natural, though they debated its ideal forms. Aristotle, ever the realist, argued some people were slaves, by nature lacking the rational soul needed for freedom. It's about as comforting as a stone pillow. But then there's Socrates, always stirring the pot. He once mused that no man is truly free unless he masters himself. In that sense, aren't we all slaves to desire, fear, or vanity? It's a nice thought until you realize the actual slave refilling his wine cup probably doesn't feel any better. And freedom. It exists, but it's fragile. A master might grant manumission a formal release. The ex-slave often stays as a client, obligated to assist the household even after gaining independence. Sometimes they take on the family name, a badge of both gratitude and permanent debt. So as you walk through the bustling streets of Athens, the truth is hard to ignore. Every wall, every road, every meal is built on the backs of people who didn't choose this life. They're invisible by design, necessary, exploited, and silent. And you realize in the dazzling light of ancient civilization, there are long, deep shadows, and those living in them know them far too well. You wake up with a pounding head, a scratchy throat, and the distinct feeling that you may not survive till evening. In today's world, you'd pop a pill and scroll WebMD. But here in ancient Greece, your journey to wellness begins with the 4 humors and ends, if you're lucky, with some herbs oil and a chicken sacrificed in your honor. Medical knowledge is still young, raw, and very much entangled with religion. The go-to explanation for most illnesses, your body's internal fluids, blood phlegm, yellow bile and black bile, are out of balance. Feeling angry, too much yellow bile. Melancholy, that's a black bile overload, coughing up gunk. Congratulations, your phlegm is living its best life. You head to the local iatros, a physician, though the line between doctor and philosopher is as thin as your last dose of diluted wine. He greets you calmly, asks how you slept, then proceeds to inspect your urine, your sweat, and maybe your dreams. Diagnosis involves observation, touch, and wild metaphors. There's no microscope, no bacteria, just the theory that everything must be in balance. If things look bad, treatment begins. First up, diet and rest. You'll be told what to eat, when to sleep, and possibly advised to avoid figs for a while. Not because figs caused your illness, but because something always needs to be blamed. Still not better. Time for more aggressive methods, cupping, bleeding, or purging. A scarificator might be brought out to release excess blood. Leeches. Optional. Vomiting encouraged. You're not getting better by fighting the illness, you're draining it. And if none of that works, there's always prayer. Healing is deeply connected to the divine, especially the cult of Asclepius, the god of medicine. You might journey to an Asclepian, a healing temple in places like Epidaurus or Kos. There you'll fast bathe and eventually sleep in the temple, a ritual called incubation. The idea you dream of the god and he heals you during the night. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just inspires some very creative hallucinations. The temple complex itself is surprisingly advanced. There are designated areas for exercise, baths, and rest. Priests, not doctors, oversee most treatments. They might rub you down with oil, offer herbal poultices, or whisper prayers as you lie under sacred laurel trees. Dogs sacred to Asclepius sometimes lick wounds as part of the healing process. It's part faith, part hygiene, and part incredibly questionable dog logic. Now let's talk surgery. Rare, risky, and only attempted when absolutely necessary. An arrow in the leg. Maybe it gets pulled. A broken arm splinted with wood and wrapped in linen. but internal surgery almost never. There's no anesthesia, no germ theory, just guts, guesses, and a lot of olive oil. Hippocrates, the big name in ancient Greek medicine, advocates gentle intervention, clinical observation, and not making things worse, which, to be fair, is a great start. A quirky fact: doctors sometimes prescribe music and poetry as part of recovery, not just for mental health, but as a literal treatment. They believed certain rhythms or modes could align your humors. So yes, if you're coughing up blood and your doctor starts playing a lyre, it's not because he's bored, it's protocol. And then there's exercise. The gymnasium isn't just for sculpting perfect abs and debating ethics. It's also part of public health. Daily training is seen as preventative medicine. A balanced body equals a balanced soul. Sweat is a cleanser. Pain is temporary. And if you pass out, someone nearby probably has a strigil and some advice about cutting down on goat cheese. Women, of course, face different challenges. Childbirth is a leading cause of death. Midwives handle deliveries with herbal knowledge, experience, and zero pain relief. There's no C-section. If something goes wrong, it goes very wrong. Still, some midwives gain high respect within communities, quiet legends who keep mothers and babies alive through sheer determination. For contraception methods include crocodile dung, yes, still a thing, honey tampons, and various herbal brews. Historians still argue which of these were remotely effective, but considering the fertility rate, let's say not very. Mental health is another beast. Melancholy, hysteria, divine possession, they're all part of the Greek understanding of the mind. The line between psychology and spirituality is blurry. You might be treated with music solitude or social reintegration. Or, if you're really unlucky, exorcism. Public health surprisingly exists in primitive form. Athens has designated waste areas, public fountains, and people whose job it is to maintain cleanliness in the agora. But sanitation, still primitive. Diseases spread quickly. Plagues are frequent. The infamous plague of Athens during the Peloponnesian War wipes out a huge portion of the population, including the great Pericles himself. No one knows what caused it. They just know it starts with a fever and ends with despair. Yet somehow life persists. The sick rest, recover, or die quietly. The healthy pray for another day of balance. And the gods, cruel, cryptic, and occasionally generous, watch from their marble pedestals. So you lie on your mat, breathing shallowly, hoping the herbal paste smeared on your chest actually contains something medicinal and not just mashed fig. You whisper a prayer to Asclepius, close your eyes, and listen to the quiet hum of the household. Because here in ancient Greece, healing isn't just science. It's ritual rhythm and trust in the gods, in nature, and in the oddly comforting scrape of a strigil at dawn. You make your way through the early morning crush, past fishmongers, loud philosophers, and one goat that definitely doesn't have a permit to be there. A head rising like a stone shell out of the slope of the Acropolis is the theater of Dionysus. And today it's packed. You're not just going to watch a play. You're attending the ancient world's version of Netflix, TED Talks, political satire, and therapy, all rolled into one. and you're not alone. Thousands of Athenians, from bearded philosophers to barefoot beggars, are streaming in, clutching dried figs and hoping for a good seat. Theater here isn't a luxury for the elite. It's a civic event, a duty, and for many a rare chance to laugh at the people in power without immediately being arrested. The smell of roasted nuts and warm dust fills the air. You find a spot on the stone tier and pull your hymation tight around your shoulders. The crowd is already buzzing. Vendors hawk snacks, old women gossip loudly, and some over-caffeinated teenage boys are quoting last year's chorus lines like it's a contest. No one whispers. Theater is loud, emotional, and wildly interactive. The day begins with tragedy. 3, in fact. That's the format for the Great Dionysia Festival, a trilogy of tragedies followed by a light-hearted satyr, play to round things out. And these aren't sad stories for the sake of tears. They're moral puzzles, emotional crucibles, and civic conversations. A king sacrifices his daughter. A mother murders her husband. A hero defies the gods. It's intense, and the audience responds with full body emotion, shouting, sobbing, gasping. Think reality TV, but with more poetic dialogue and less product placement. You look around and see men wiping their eyes openly. Catharsis, emotional purification, is part of the design. It's supposed to hurt. It's supposed to make you think. And it's supposed to prepare you for life as a better, wiser citizen. Aristotle himself would later say, "Tragedy purges our pity and fear." Of course, he wasn't sitting in the nosebleeds next to a guy who smells like pickled onions. After the tragedies come the comedies. And this is where things get really weird. Comedic plays in ancient Athens are wild, raunchy, and razor sharp. They satirize politics, mock public figures, and swing between toilet humor and philosophy with reckless abandon. Playwrights like Aristophanes throw punches at everyone: generals, philosophers, poets, even the gods. Costumes are extravagant and absurd. Masks are oversized with exaggerated expressions. Chorus members might dress as frogs' clouds or loaves of bread. And the jokes equal parts fart noises and intricate critiques of Athenian democracy. It's theater as stand-up roast meets sacred ritual. One quirky fact: male actors wore fake appendages, long floppy props for comedic effect. These weren't subtle. They wobbled, they flopped. They were used in jokes that would get you kicked out of most modern classrooms. Historians still argue whether these props symbolized fertility chaos or just really lowbrow humor. Either way, the crowd loved it. The chorus, usually 15 masked performers, sings, dances, comments on the action, and occasionally breaks the fourth wall to scold the audience. You laugh along even if the jokes are sometimes layered with cultural references and inside gossip. That's half the fun: understanding enough to feel superior, but confused enough to stay intrigued. Theatrical competitions are deadly serious. Playwrights submit their works for judgment, and winners are honored like Olympic champions. Their names are remembered. Their plays are etched into memory, sometimes even stone. Losers. Still famous, but with less bragging rights and fewer chorus boys named after them. Attendance is technically mandatory for citizens during festival season. The city even pays a small subsidy thyricon to help the poor attend. Because this isn't just entertainment, it's part of your civic education. The plays teach justice, mercy, moderation. and the terrible cost of hubris. Laughing and weeping together isn't just emotional bonding, it's national therapy. And yes, women attend too, though in fewer numbers and usually confined to specific sections. Their presence is debated, sometimes resented, but ultimately tolerated. Because if there's one thing everyone agrees on, it's that a well-timed joke about a corrupt politician is worth sharing with your entire household. You watch as an actor in a towering mask stomps across the stage voice, amplified by the theater's perfect acoustics. There's no curtain, no intermission. Scene changes happen through clever entrances, dancing, and that iconic crane, the McCain, which literally hoists gods into the air when divine intervention is required. It's the original Deus ex machina, and yes, it's just as clunky as it sounds. As the day stretches on, the sun shifts across the marble tiers, casting long shadows over faces both joyful and solemn. You feel the collective breath of thousands rising and falling in rhythm with the drama. Someone behind you drops a fig. Someone else laughs too loudly. And the actors keep chanting, gesturing, and teaching through story. You realize this isn't escapism, it's engagement. The Greeks used theater not to flee reality, but to confront it painfully, hilariously, publicly. It's a mirror held up to the city's soul, cracked and smeared with olive oil, but still revealing. And as the final chorus sings and the crowd erupts in applause, clapping, stomping, whistling, you stand too, feeling drained and exhilarated. You've cried for kings, laughed at gods, and judged a playwright's worth by how well he made you feel something in your guts. Because in ancient Greece, theater isn't a sideshow, it's the main event. And everyone from slave to statesman is part of the performance. The sun is dipping low now, casting amber light across the agora. But the city isn't winding down. Not yet. Because while the bakers close up shop and the butchers scrub their stalls, a different kind of business is just getting started argument. Welcome to the philosophical battlefield of ancient Greece. You ease into a shadowy corner of the square near a cluster of marble benches where a man in a plain chiton is already drawing a crowd. He looks scruffy, barefoot, probably hasn't bathed today. That's Socrates. And he's about to ruin someone's entire worldview with nothing but questions. This is philosophy not as lecture, but as performance. And Socrates, he's the main act. He doesn't write anything down. He doesn't charge fees. He just walks up to people and starts asking things like, what is justice or what is courage? Sounds harmless, right? But 10 minutes in, you realize you've contradicted yourself 4 times, lost the will to argue, and publicly admitted you don't know what you thought you knew. The Socratic method isn't gentle. It's sharp, surgical, and weirdly addictive. Citizens gather just to watch the verbal duels. Merchants pause mid-sale. Students lean in. And someone in the back definitely has a betting pool going. One quirky fact: Socrates was once a soldier, a hoplite, and fought bravely in several battles. But he always claimed that true courage was standing your ground in the face of uncomfortable truth. And judging by the nervous-looking youth he's currently dissecting with logic, he hasn't lost his edge. Around him, other philosophers prowl. There's Plato, his student, quietly observing and probably taking mental notes for another 30 dialogue collection. And there's Diogenes, who lives in a barrel, insults everyone, and claims to be searching for an honest man by daylight. Spoiler, he doesn't find one. Philosophy here is not academic. It's lived, breathed, weaponized. The schools are public spaces, gyms, gardens, street corners. Anyone can join. Anyone can lose. In the Stoa Poikile, the painted colonnade, you find the Stoics. Led by Zeno, they preach control over emotion, resilience in hardship, and the power of reason. It's therapy before therapy. Feel pain, accept it. Feel joy, don't chase it. Want to yell at your boss, don't. Because all things pass and your peace is worth more than your outrage. Down the road, the Epicureans set up shop in a peaceful garden. Their motto, seek pleasure, avoid pain, and don't fear death. It's just nothingness. But pleasure to them isn't wild partying. It's a life of calm friendship and cheese in moderation. Historians still argue whether Epicurus actually said don't fear the gods, or if he just meant don't let their drama ruin your picnic. Meanwhile, the sophists are running paid seminars on how to win arguments. They're slick, well-dressed, and controversial. They teach rhetoric, not truth. For them, words are tools, not paths. And Socrates can't stand them. To him, they represent everything wrong with Athens' cleverness, without wisdom, style, without substance. You notice a teenage boy, probably upper class, sweating under philosophical pressure. His tutor nudges him to respond. The crowd leans in. Socrates smiles gently, then asks again, "So if justice is what benefits the strong, does that make injustice beneficial to the weak?" The kid stammers. Somewhere nearby, a vendor sells figs. A stray dog yawns. The world keeps spinning, but for this boy, everything is shaking. It's easy to think these debates are just mental gymnastics, but they ripple outward. Philosophy shapes law, policy, education. It questions the gods, democracy, the soul. Plato's Republic imagines a city ruled by philosopher kings. Aristotle writes treatises on ethics, politics, biology, using observation and logic to map the world. And it's not just the men. Aspasia, partner of Pericles, is known for her wit and rhetorical skill. Though barred from speaking in the assembly, she's rumored to write speeches and influence major policy. Some even suggest she taught Socrates a thing or two. No one says it too loudly. A quirky detail, the term cynic, as in Diogenes and his crew, comes from kynekos, meaning dog-like, because Diogenes lives like a stray, eating with his hands, relieving himself in public, and barking at hypocrisy. He once told Alexander the Great to stand out of his sunlight. Confidence or something much louder, these thinkers challenge everything. What makes a life good? Can virtue be taught? Do the gods care? Are we just atoms swirling in a void? The questions are endless, the answers contradictory. And that's the point. There's no one truth here. There's pursuit. The constant stretching of thought, the wrestling with existence. And it's not quiet. You don't meditate on a mountain. You shout it out in the street. As night falls, the crowd disperses. Socrates strolls off, hands clasped behind his back, probably on his way to annoy someone else over dinner. The boy who argued with him now sits alone, staring at a fig and wondering what justice even means anymore. And you feel it too, that strange electric tingle in your brain. Philosophy here isn't a subject, it's a way of life. It's a kind of combat. And the only weapon you're allowed to carry is a really good question. The sun rises again over the Nyx, and with it, Athens does something truly unique. It votes to make someone disappear. Welcome to ostracism, not in the modern passive-aggressive sense of being left out of group chats, but the Athenian institution, where you can be legally banished for 10 years without a trial, without a crime, and often without much warning. It's the ancient world's answer to cancel culture, but instead of hashtags and hot takes, you get a broken bit of pottery and a brisk walk to the border. You join the citizens clustering near the agora. It's a big day, ostracophoria, the annual vote to determine if anyone should be cast out for the good of the city. It's not a punishment exactly, more like a civic timeout. If someone's becoming too powerful, too influential, or too charismatic, the people vote to neutralize them before they become a threat. Each citizen writes a name on an ostracon, a discarded pottery shard. You see piles of them scratched with names like Themistocles, Simon, Aristides. Sometimes they're spelled hilariously wrong. Literacy isn't universal after all, and there's no standard spelling. But if enough votes stack up, 6,000 is the threshold. The person named has 10 days to leave Athens. No trial, no debate, just pack up and go. The irony. Some of these men helped save the city. Themistocles, for example, masterminded the Athenian victory at Salamis, defeating the mighty Persian navy. Years later, his growing influence spooked the citizens. Banned. He wandered Asia Minor until his death, never returning. Or take Aristides, nicknamed the Just. He was so famously honest that one voter asked why he scratched Aristides' name, replied, "I'm tired of hearing him called the Just all the time," burned by his own reputation. Ostracism isn't personal. Well, it is. But it's political personal. It reflects Athens' deep fear of tyranny of any single man rising high enough to threaten their precious democracy. Better to boot them early than bow to them later. And here's a quirky fact. The votes were cast into containers called keramikos, and some of the discarded ostraca have been found by archaeologists with doodles. One has a crude little ship. Another features a man with absurdly long legs. Apparently, even exile votes weren't immune to ancient meme culture. You pass a man pacing near the voting area. His name has been floating around the taverns lately. Too much success, too many compliments. He tries to look casual, but his eyes dart from shard to shard. Every clink of pottery makes him flinch. Being too popular here is dangerous. It makes people nervous. Historians still argue whether ostracism actually worked. Some say it was an effective pressure valve preventing coups. Others argue it backfired more often than not, exiling competent leaders and leaving Athens vulnerable. It was eventually phased out, replaced by more complex legal tools, and ironically, more corruption. The process itself is strangely democratic. Anyone can be nominated. No one is above suspicion, and once you're out, you're not disgraced. Your property isn't seized, your family isn't punished, you're just gone for a decade. Some use the time to travel. Others licked their wounds and plotted a comeback. A few never returned. You lean on a low wall watching as citizens approach the scribes men hired to help the illiterate scratch names onto shards. A few are whispering. Deals might be happening. Exile, after all, removes rivals. You don't need to prove someone's dangerous. You just need to make them seem like a risk. And in the ultimate irony, there were rumors, whispers in the symposiums that some politicians pre-wrote hundreds of ostraca with a rival's name and distributed them to voters like party favors. It's the ancient version of ballot stuffing. Sometimes the system that's supposed to prevent power grabs just becomes another tool to grab power. Yet for all its messiness, ostracism is oddly elegant. It acknowledges a truth we often pretend isn't there, that power, even in a democracy, concentrates, and that people, even well-meaning ones, can become threats. So Athens built a system of reset. Brutal, simple, clean, but not always fair. You turn and see a woman pouring wine into a cup. She's not allowed to vote, not allowed to speak in the assembly, but she knows what's going on. The ostracized man used to dine with her husband. Now she's already planning which cousin will help maintain the estate while he's gone. Because life continues. The city doesn't pause for drama. It moves on swiftly, efficiently, and with a kind of performative shrug. And you drop your shard into the urn heart, pounding slightly. You picked a name. Maybe it won't matter. Maybe he'll stay. But maybe tomorrow he'll be walking south past Eleusis, past the boundary stones, 10 years of thinking ahead of him. No mobs, no fires, just a quiet shuffle of sandals and the soft clatter of pottery deciding someone's fate. The wind shifts as you walk past a household shrine, a modest clay figure of Apollo perched above a flickering oil lamp. The scent of burning myrrh mingles with the usual dust and garlic, but today it feels heavier because someone in the neighborhood has died. Death in ancient Greece isn't just a family affair. It's a moment of cosmic tension. You stop outside a door marked with wreaths of twisted branches. Inside, the family wails, not quietly, not politely, but with full-bodied grief. It's loud, raw, and absolutely expected. Mourning here is a public performance. Silence, oddly, is considered suspicious. If you're the immediate family, you prepare the body. No undertakers, no embalming. You wash the corpse, anoint it with oil, and wrap it in a plain cloth. The eyes are closed with coins, a boloi pressed into the lids, or placed in the mouth, payment for Charon, the underworld ferryman. No coin, no passage. And you definitely don't want to wander the riverbank of the dead. The body stays at home for one day, laid out on a couch or table. Visitors come to pay respects, offer olive branches, and tell awkward, half-sad stories about the time the deceased dropped a whole amphora at market. Then before dawn the next day, the procession begins. You join the small crowd moving through the streets. Professional mourners lead the way, tearing at their hair and robes with theatrical despair. Family follows behind, holding torches and chanting prayers to Hades and Persephone. The dead are buried quickly. The Greek sun doesn't wait for sentiment. Cremation exists, but burial is more common, often just outside city limits. Graves range from humble to elaborate. A poor man might get a simple stone. A rich family commissions a marble stele with carved scenes of the departed shaking hands, with the living an eternal wordless goodbye. And then offerings begin. Libations of wine, milk, or honey, bits of food, occasionally a scrap of poetry or a toy. Because the dead are not gone, they're just relocated. You don't forget them. That's dangerous. The restless dead, those who are not properly mourned or buried, become atafoi wandering spirits who bring illness and misfortune. Even worse are the biai othanatoi, those who died violently. They're believed to linger angry and hungry for revenge. You drop an extra fig at the grave just in case. Religion in Greece isn't about belief. It's about practice. You make offerings, observe festivals, respect taboos. You don't have to love the gods. You just have to not offend them. Because they are very, very offendable. The pantheon is huge and moody. Zeus the sky father with a lightning addiction. Hera perpetually furious. Poseidon whose temper shakes the earth. Athena wise and warlike. Dionysus chaos in grape form. You worship them all. You don't get to pick a favorite. You just try to keep them happy or at least distracted. Every city has its patron deity. Athens is Athena's turf, obviously. You see her statues everywhere, helmeted, wise-eyed, spear in hand. But every household also has its own domestic rituals. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, gets a few crumbs every morning. Hermes guards the threshold. Offerings to them are casual routine. Part of life, like brushing your teeth, if brushing your teeth involved bloodless animal sacrifice. Yes, sacrifice. The most common form of worship. Not dramatic slaughter every time, though. Those happen during big festivals, but smaller, symbolic gestures. You might kill a chicken, pour out its blood, and burn the bones. The smell rises. The gods inhale. It's a shared meal if you squint hard enough. But the gods are not safe, cuddly concepts. They don't guarantee love, justice, or forgiveness. They cheat, punish, and destroy with baffling randomness. And mortals mostly try to stay out of their way. Still, you need them. You pray for harvests, safe births, naval victories. You make pacts. You leave honey cakes at crossroads for Hecate, goddess of ghosts and witchcraft. You whisper to Gaia when burying a stillborn child. You scratch a name into a lead tablet and drop it into a sacred spring, cursing your enemy with divine bureaucracy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Greeks had no clear idea of what the afterlife was like. You go to the underworld, sure, but it's not heaven or hell. It's just gray. The asphodel meadows are a gloomy plain of forgetfulness. The good go to the Elysian fields, maybe. The very bad might end up in Tartarus getting their livers pecked out for eternity. But most souls, they just drift. Shadows of their former selves, bored and faded. So the real goal isn't heaven. It's kleos glory. Being remembered. A good death. A noble deed. Your name carved in stone or sung by poets. That's immortality. And that's why funerals are as much for the living as the dead. You perform grief. You write epitaphs. You tell stories. Because forgetting is the worst sin of all. As the procession returns to town, you see the women of the household sweeping the threshold with pine branches cleansing the space of death's residue. There's food on the table, wine poured in silence. and eyes flicking toward the doorway, unsure if the spirit is truly gone. Because in ancient Greece, death isn't the end. It's a shift, a movement from one realm to another, shadowed and unknowable. The best you can do is mourn loud, sacrifice properly, and never, never say the gods' names with anything less than cautious reverence. You've been traveling north beyond the Greek cities into lands where Rome's influence is shrinking, and tribal communities breathe in solidarity and outrage. And right now, all eyes are on one woman, Buudaca. Her story begins with humiliation. After Rome's conquest of her tribe, the Iceni, their sacred land was seized, property auctioned, even their king, a client of Rome, stripped of power. Buudaca herself was publicly humiliated. Her crown removed, her daughter subjected to Roman violence, and her dignity crushed in front of her people. That spectacle, the spark everyone ignored, until it became a blaze. But Buudaca is not a victim you feel sorry for. She's the kind of person who stands up, wipes dirt from her knee, and tells you to bow instead. She channels collective trauma into action. She speaks in public spaces, rallies fellow Iceni, and promises justice Rome's way or none. Her words sting louder than their swords. She's turning personal rage into public rebellion, and the tribe once fractured is uniting behind her banner. The rumor mill spills the tale. Her family's lands seized, her girls treated as war prize. They've been violated in ways Rome refuses to acknowledge. That's enough kindness for a Roman senator, but for Buudaca, it's confirmation you cross a woman like that at your peril. Historians still argue how she marshaled the tribes. Some credit her fine rhetoric, charismatic, authoritative, fearless. Others point to practical alliances. She marries tribal lines through marriage promises, joint raids, and offers mutual protection. Either way, she's emerging not as a warrior queen in armor, but as a strategist and symbol. Think less warrior goddess, more master tactician who refuses to lose. She doesn't carry a sword. She carries hope and rage. And maybe that makes her more dangerous than any gladius-wielding centurion, because opposing Rome, that's death. But opposing a grieving mother who's too angry to wait, you're hellbound. Buudaca organizes covert meetings in wooded glades near ancient standing stones using traditions older than Rome to claim political legitimacy. She invokes ancestral spirits, local deities, and tribal law, everything the Romans disdained. It's rebellion fused with cultural revival. Colonizers fear fighters. They hate poets, and Buudaca is both. Even Rome's agents notice. Tribes once loyal start withholding taxes and supplies. Local merchants find their caravans lost, ambushed. The Roman governor receives letters, anonymous threats, prayers to escaping gods. Rome may have legions, but Buudaca has the land, the people, and the conviction that living under Rome is worse than death. And to her people, she's a legend in the making. There's already an unofficial coinage stories whispered around fires strike while the eagle snores. They say meaning the Roman eagle of authority. A symbol born not of coronation, but of resistance. The irony. The Romans say she's a rebel queen stirring superstition. The tribes call her their liberator, their mother, their stormbringer. Historians still argue whether her success depended more on divine claim or razor-sharp diplomacy. But one thing's clear before any blade is drawn. She's already declared war with her reputation. So as you trek through misty bogs and rolling grasslands, you encounter her symbol, a carved wooden figure draped in wild flowers. It's crude, but defiant. And beneath its gaze, more and more people step forward. Some bring food for hidden camps. Others bring strategic knowledge, where Roman patrols patrol where their supplies sleep. Buudaca didn't raise an army yet, but she's built a movement, a rebellion simmering under the veneer of peace. And for the first time in decades, the people see a path not just to survival under Rome, but to freedom. You feel it too. Their hope is infectious. And if she leads you wonder, will the next dawn be a victory or a beginning of something far greater? The mist has barely lifted from the hills when Buudaca's forces descend upon Camulodunum. This Roman settlement, proud and smug in its neat stone streets and temples, never sees it coming. They think their walls their gods, and their arrogance will protect them. But when Buudaca's tribes arrive, they don't just attack, they erupt. The city cracks like old clay under floodwater. Camulodunum is a symbol of Roman dominance built atop what used to be sacred ground. The locals remember. The massive temple to Claudius, recently finished, stands tall, a shrine to the emperor who invaded their homeland. Now it becomes a death trap. Roman citizens flee inside, believing the gods will shield them. Buudaca's army lays siege for 2 days. Then they burn it to the ground. Ash and screams rise into the sky. There are no survivors. Not many, at least. The townspeople, officials, merchants, their families are slaughtered. No exceptions. It's brutal, shocking, absolute. This isn't a skirmish. It's vengeance. You stand now among the blackened ruins. The stench of burnt wood mingles with blood and metal. The few survivors whisper of Buudaca's chariot, her daughters beside her, hair, wild eyes like thunderclouds. She doesn't flinch, doesn't shout. She simply watches. And then they move on. Next, Londinium, a bustling port barely 2 decades old. It's not even officially a city, but it's rich, Roman, and vulnerable. Roman officials, hearing of Camulodunum's destruction, consider a defense. But Governor Suetonius is off suppressing rebellion in Wales, and there's no legion near enough to protect the city. So they abandon it. When Buudaca arrives, Londinium is already in chaos. Those who couldn't flee huddle in basements, praying to Roman gods for a miracle. But Buudaca offers none. Her army pours into the streets. They loot, torch kill. Buildings fall, smoke blankets the river. Roman records speak of horrors, burned temples, crucified civilians' bodies piled in the forum. It's not just war, it's retribution. And still they're not done. Vercelamium falls next, less defended, more symbolic. Here, Roman influence is stitched into the local elite, the architecture a blend of tribal and imperial. Buudaca's fury is more efficient this time. She doesn't need speeches. Her warriors know what to do. The firestorm is methodical. Torch rays move on. In weeks, over 70,000 Romans and Roman sympathizers are dead. The empire's hold on Britain is unraveling like a poorly tied sandal. Historians still argue about the numbers. Some say the death toll is inflated Roman propaganda to justify the harsh crackdown that follows. Others say it's underplayed an erasure of tribal might. But there's no debate over the fear. Rome is rattled. This wasn't a border raid. This was a coordinated strike, led by a woman the empire didn't see coming. A quirky footnote. Some Roman coins, minted just after the revolt, show goddess figures with upturned spears, reversed from their usual victorious stance. Some scholars think this reflects Rome's shaken psyche. The goddess isn't winning. She's preparing for retaliation. As the smoke from 3 cities still darkens the sky, Buudaca consolidates. Her forces swell with new recruits, disgruntled tribes, runaway slaves, even former Roman auxiliaries, disgusted by imperial cruelty. Her army is massive, tens of thousands strong. But it's raw, fueled by rage more than discipline. And that's the problem. They lack formation, command, supply lines. They've been riding a wave of shock and fury, but waves crash. You ride with them now past corpses and crushed standards, past fields still smoldering. The tribes sing old songs, war chants, laments, oaths to ancient gods. They wear face paint, carry curved blades, and chant Buudaca's name as both prayer and promise. She remains composed. No mad queen, no ranting warrior. She speaks with the calm of a storm before lightning. Her daughters sit beside her in the war chariot, blood still smeared on their tunics. They don't blink when they pass the dead. Rome, finally awake, is scrambling. Governor Suetonius gathers what forces he can. Veterans, stragglers, cavalry from distant forts. Not many, but disciplined. Armed, angry, and they're headed for a final clash. But for now, Buudaca rules. She's burned 3 Roman settlements. She's sent governors fleeing. She's given a voice to every tribe who thought Rome couldn't be challenged. And in this moment, as crows circle scorched temples and wind carries the smell of victory, the world knows one truth. Rome bleeds, and Buudaca holds the knife. The fire crackles low as night settles around you, and the echoes of Buudaca's fury fade into the dark. But before you drift away completely, there's one more path to walk, one that winds through temples, clay tablets, and the careful hands of healers in lands far older than Greece and Rome. Because long before Hippocrates was asking about your phlegm, other ancient civilizations were crafting their own blueprints for health and healing. And each had its own philosophy, its own sacred logic. We begin in Mesopotamia, the land between rivers where the sick sought help from both doctors and gods. Cuneiform tablets preserved in dusty libraries describe treatments combining herbal remedies with incantations. Got a fever? That might be a demon. Take this poultice made from tamarisk bark and recite a prayer to Gula, the goddess of healing. Recovery is part medicine, part spiritual negotiation. Babylonian physicians categorized illnesses based on symptoms, not unlike modern diagnoses. They even had early surgical tools, bronze knives, bandages, bone-setting splints. But success, that was never guaranteed. Doctors were judged harshly. If a surgery went bad, the consequences could include losing a hand. healthcare with high stakes. Further east in ancient India, the sages of the Indus Valley were already brewing something different, Ayurveda. It's more than treatment. It's a complete system of life. Harmony between body, mind, and environment is everything. Disease arises when the balance between Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, the three doshas, is disrupted. You picture an Indian healer grinding herbs under a banyan tree blending turmeric, ginger, neem. They might prescribe yoga dietary changes or breathing exercises alongside warm tonics. Ayurveda isn't reactive. It's preventative, aiming to sustain vitality before sickness ever touches you. And in China, medicine becomes philosophy. The earliest texts, like the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, speak of qi, the life energy flowing through the body. Health is about smooth flow. Blocked qi, that's illness. Practitioners use acupuncture, moxibustion, and herbal concoctions brewed from ginseng licorice root and lotus seed. They read the pulse like a musician reads rhythm, looking not just for speed, but for character, texture, and tone. Even your tongue becomes a map of your body's internal weather. China's concept of yin and yang filters into every diagnosis. Hot and cold, dry and damp, active and passive, all must balance. You don't treat the disease. You treat the terrain it sprouted in. Slide south to Egypt, where temples double as clinics. Here, healing is both a public institution and a sacred act. Physicians known as Eswaranoi recorded symptoms, treatments, and surgical observations on papyri. They had knowledge of the heart vessels, even brain trauma. Some prescriptions are surprisingly sophisticated, others deeply magical. To treat a toothache, you might chew on willow bark. Hello, ancient aspirin, while wearing an amulet invoking Thoth, the god of wisdom. Because in Egypt, science and sorcery walked hand in hand, and nobody thought to separate them. Even indigenous cultures, whose practices rarely made it into scrolls or statues, carried rich medical traditions passed orally. In the Americas, shamans used cocoa chili tobacco and obsidian scalpels. In sub-Saharan Africa, baobab bark and storytelling were healing agents. In the Arctic Inuit, elders used moss and snow and chant to guide both body and soul back to wholeness. Across time, across continents, one idea persists. Healing isn't just about the body. It's about meaning, connection, ritual, breath. Modern medicine, with its machines and scans and double-blind trials, is miraculous but not infallible. And as it speeds forward, some look back. Acupuncture is practiced in hospitals. Ayurvedic principles inform wellness diets. Yoga stretches across continents. People drink elderberry syrup, burn sage, seek holistic care. Not because they reject science, but because they crave wholeness. Historians still argue whether these ancient systems worked. Did acupuncture really cure pain? Did the doshas hold real chemical truths, or were they metaphors? Helpful illusions guiding people toward rest and rhythm. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real wisdom of the ancients lies not in the accuracy of their diagnoses, but in the way they placed healing in the heart of life, in community, in the sacred, in the belief that to care for a body is to care for a soul. You sit now beneath a night sky as old as any tablet or temple, and you feel the weight of centuries pressing gently on your chest, not heavy, but reassuring. You're not the first to ache, not the first to wonder, and not the first to seek comfort in touch, breath, ritual, and rhyme. And maybe, just maybe, some part of you still believes that healing begins with listening to your body, to the earth, and to the whispers of the past. The lights are low now. The fire's glow has faded into embers, and all that's left is the soft hush of night and the rhythm of your own breathing. Let's slow down here. Let's soften everything. You've walked through the heat of Greek city-states and the cool shadows of rebellion. You felt the sting of olive oil scraped across skin, the clatter of hoplite armor, the laughter in an ancient theater, and the silence of a battlefield. You've seen what it means to live hard love fiercely and die with your name still echoing in someone's memory. But let it all fade now. You're lying on a woven mat, or maybe something softer in your mind, and the ancient world drifts around you like smoke. The gods once loud are whispering. The streets of Athens are quiet, the agora empty. Somewhere a fig tree rustles and a woman hums while grinding grain. No rush, no speeches, no battles, just breath, in and out. Let the weight of the armor fall from your shoulders. Let the dust of the past slip from your hands. You don't have to run anymore, not toward victory, not away from it, not toward glory, not away from pain. Just be still in this place between then and now. Imagine cool stone under your back, a breeze through cypress trees, the hush of distant waves against an Aegean shore. You're safe, you're seen, you've made it through. And as your eyes grow heavy, know this history isn't just stories. It's echoes inside you. It's every hard lesson whispered across time. And tonight those echoes lull you not to think harder, but to rest deeper. Sleep now. You've journeyed far.